With us, Janti Soeripto, who's the president and chief executive at Save the Children in the U.S., joining us from Weston in Connecticut. Thanks for your time. You yourself were at the Rafah crossing in January, and you saw several items that were rejected. What surprised you the most?
Well, thank you, Doreen. What surprised me the most, quite a few things. I saw a wooden toy box with games for children being rejected because the box was made of wood and had to be repacked in carton boxes. I saw hygiene kits with soap and blankets and sanitary pads for women rejected because there was a nail clipper in it. So that list goes on. And I think the key thing here is also it is very unpredictable which trucks can make it into Gaza and which ones are rejected. So I saw hundreds of trucks there at the cross in Arish waiting for their turn. Some of them were there for the second or third time. And then sometimes they did get in because there was authorization given for those trucks. Sometimes they were returned, sometimes they got in on the second or third time. So it is that level of unpredictability and the sheer inadequacy of the number of supplies that are coming in that is making the delivery of good humanitarian assistance at scale so complicated in Gaza today.
So from what you saw, what did they actually allow in and in what sorts of quantities?
They allowed in basic food items, blankets, clean water in bottles, flour. So some of that made it in. It was just woefully inadequate, even at the time. And this was late January. We saw, when I was there were about 130 trucks on average per day going in, versus the 500 trucks that were going in before October 7th. Now we're, 5-6 weeks later, we're now looking at a further diminishment of the number of trucks being allowed in. So that is a real problem. And aside from that, even if trucks make it into Gaza, then distribution inside Gaza is still hugely problematic, partly because of the deconfliction and the violence that you just talked about earlier that is still going on. It's making it unsafe for us to do our work and unsafe for the communities we are trying to help. And there's so much rubble and destruction around that it is physically even hard to actually get to the last mile in order to deliver our supplies when they make it in.
Right. So how do organizations like yours then deal with what seems to be, from what you're describing, a completely chaotic situation?
It is chaotic, it is woefully inadequate, and the situation is getting worse by the minute. We are now hearing reports from children starving to death, literally starving to death, completely unnecessarily, aside from the injuries and the killing that's been going on because of the lack of a ceasefire. What we're doing, we're trying to do our utmost. We have about 30 colleagues inside, mostly Palestinians, with a number of international colleagues there. We're trying to do everything we can to get life-saving aid to people, to get medicines to hospitals, to get malnutrition treatment to children when we can, but it is severely impacted. We would love to do, we can do much, much more, but again, we need a ceasefire. We need many more trucks coming in over land. We have no time to wait for a sea solution, however creative it is. And we need that deconfliction, so that assurance that our convoys, our locations, our offices, our warehouses are kept safe,
right,
in order to do our work.
But, I mean, this is Israel's response. They say that Israel assists, encourages and facilitates the entry of humanitarian aid for the residents of the Gaza Strip and for medical and other critical infrastructures in the Strip. But clearly, that's not what you saw. What's your response to what they have to say?
It's a drip feed. I mean, if facilitation is to get 50, 60 trucks a day in, whereas what we need is 500. I'm not quite sure what the definition really means. So we have seen a number of times that trucks that want to go to the north, where still 15% of the population is, they've had almost nothing since over the past number of weeks and months. People are eating tree leaves, they're mixing animal foods with whatever flour they can find in order to make bread. I mean, it is really dire up in the north, even if it's also bad in Rafah. So we do not see, in practice on the ground, that facilitation working.
Okay, we thank you so much for joining us from Connecticut.
Thank you.
Well,